History isn't always changed by the biggest decisions. Sometimes it's a tiny mistake, an overlooked danger, or one decision that seemed harmless at the time. Here are 5 moments when small mistakes changed history forever. Why the first attempt at the Panama Canal failed. The first builders of the Panama Canal thought they were fighting mountains. They were actually fighting mosquitoes, and that mistake cost more than 20,000 lives. In 1881, France began building a canal to connect the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. The project was led by Ferdinand de Lesseps, the engineer who had successfully built the Suez Canal. Many believed he could do it again. But Panama wasn't a desert like Egypt. It was hot, humid, and filled with disease. Thousands of workers died from yellow fever and malaria, long before anyone knew mosquitoes were spreading them. Meanwhile, torrential rains triggered massive landslides that buried months of work. After spending enormous sums of money and losing more than 20,000 workers, the project had to be abandoned. Science had not caught up to the deadly diseases. More than 20 years later, the United States took over the project. By then, scientists had finally discovered that mosquitoes spread yellow fever. Under Dr. William Gorgas, workers drained swamps, destroyed mosquito breeding grounds, and protected entire communities from disease. At the same time, engineers had to abandon the sea level plan and built a canal using massive locks instead. Slowly, the impossible became possible. The first Panama Canal didn't fail because engineers couldn't move enough dirt. It failed because they misunderstood nature itself. Sometimes, the smallest enemy can defeat the biggest dream. Why one mother took on the government. In 1978, in Niagara Falls, New York, one mother discovered something terrifying. Her son was going to school beside a buried chemical waste dump, and the chemicals were coming back. For decades, Niagara Falls, New York, had built its economy around the power of the falls. By the mid-20th century, it was a major industrial center, with factories using electricity generated by the river. Tourism existed on both sides, but Niagara Falls, New York became especially tied to power and industry, while Canada's side increasingly built its identity around tourism. At Love Canal, the industrial legacy was literally buried underground, and the name itself goes back to the 1890s. Entrepreneur William T. Love dreamed of building a model industrial city here, powered by a canal connecting the Niagara River to generate cheap electricity. The project was abandoned, but the unfinished canal kept his name. Decades later, that same canal would become a chemical waste dump. Between 1942 and 1953, more than 21,000 tons of hazardous chemicals were dumped into the abandoned canal. Then homes and a school were built nearby. As groundwater rose, chemicals began moving into the surrounding neighborhood. Residents reported strange odors, chemical residues, and contaminated water, and serious health concerns began emerging. There were reports of miscarriages, birth defects, and other health problems. New York State declared a public health emergency. That's when Lois Gibbs stopped waiting for someone else to fix it. She went door to door. She organized her neighbors, and she demanded that the government get their families out. The residents refused to stay quiet. The pressure worked. President Jimmy Carter declared federal emergencies, and families were relocated. Then, in 1980, Congress created Superfund, the federal program for cleaning up abandoned hazardous waste sites. Lois Gibbs went on to help communities across America fight environmental threats. One neighborhood in Niagara Falls helped change environmental policy across the country. Why square airplane windows were deadly. Square airplane windows killed people. That's why you'll never see them on a modern airliner. But how could the shape of a window bring down an entire airplane? In the early 1950s, The world's first commercial jetliner, the de Havilland Comet, looked like the future. It flew higher and faster than anything before it. But hidden inside those square windows was a deadly engineering flaw. Every time the airplane climbed, the cabin was pressurized. When it landed, that pressure was released. Over hundreds of flights, the sharp corners of square windows concentrated enormous stress. Tiny cracks formed, until the metal suddenly failed. Several comets broke apart in midair, forcing one of the largest engineering investigations in aviation history. Engineers discovered that rounded windows spread pressure much more evenly. Without sharp corners, there were no major stress points where cracks could easily begin. It was a simple design change that dramatically improved aircraft safety. Today, every time you board a commercial airplane, you're surrounded by that lesson. Rounded windows became one of aviation's simplest and most important safety improvements. The next time you look out an airplane window, remember, its shape isn't about giving you a better view. It's there because engineers learned that square windows could become deadly. And that's why square airplane windows disappeared forever. Why one wrong turn helped start World War I. On June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was visiting Sarajevo when someone threw a bomb at his car. It exploded, but Franz Ferdinand survived. The assassination had failed, or so everyone believed. Instead of leaving the city, Franz Ferdinand insisted on visiting the people injured in the bombing. The motorcade's route was changed, but not everyone received the new instructions. Following the original route, the driver made a wrong turn. An officer shouted for him to stop and reverse. For a few critical seconds, the car sat motionless, right in front of Gavrilo Princip, another member of the assassination plot. Believing the mission had already failed, Princip was suddenly given an unexpected second chance. He stepped forward and fired 2 shots. Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie both died from their wounds. Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia, alliances were activated, and within weeks much of Europe was at war. World War I had begun. A failed bombing, a missed message, and one wrong turn became part of the chain of events that helped start World War I. Why the Halifax explosion changed maritime traffic forever. In 1917, 2 ships tried to pass each other in a narrow harbor. One tiny miscommunication later, they'd caused the largest human-made explosion before the nuclear age. The Mont Blanc, loaded with nearly 3,000 tons of explosives, was heading into Halifax harbor. The Imo was heading out. In the tight corridor known as the Narrows, both ships tried to avoid each other, and each move mirrored the others until they collided. The collision sparked a fire, and minutes later the Mont Blanc detonated. Nearly 2,000 people died, 9,000 were injured, and 1,600 buildings were leveled in a city of just 80,000 people. The investigation found something simple at the core of it. There were no real rules for handling ships loaded with explosives, and no clear system for controlling traffic in a busy, narrow harbor. So, Halifax changed the rules. Only one ship allowed through the Narrows at a time. Internationally, it pushed forward stricter laws requiring hazardous cargo to be clearly marked and harbor traffic to be properly controlled. Rules that, in evolved form, still govern shipping today. One collision, one city changed forever. 5 stories. 5 moments when small decisions, overlooked dangers, and simple mistakes changed history. If you want to discover more stories hiding behind the world around you, subscribe to 90 Seconds Why